A Love Supreme, live in Seattle, John Coltrane Quartet. Amended quartet with a percussionist, with 2 extra saxophonists, with an extra bass player. This is the album cover, which is a really horrible album cover, if you want to know my opinion. Better than the album cover art is the liner notes art, which is much better. Somebody must have flipped a coin at Universal and said, whoever wins, wins, and this person must have won. I mean, I could have done that. But regardless of the way that looks, this is an incredible recording. I will go on record. I will go on record as to say that I think this is the perfect companion piece to the studio version. There's the studio version where everything is nice and tidy, and there's a time limit, and the red light is going for the recording. And then there's this version, cut in Seattle, the weekend, I believe, of October 10th, 1965, as part of a long tour the group are doing across the country. I read in the liner notes that Coltrane, for part of the tour, is driving the guys around in his station wagon. What the heck? But back in the mid-60s, there was a tour that there was a circuit you could have played. So I'm sure he went to Chicago, Detroit, probably Kansas City. Then they wove their way, maybe Albuquerque, out to Seattle, California, obviously, then Seattle. But not all the dates got recorded. This particular album is preceded, this was recorded on the weekend. During the week, it's the live in Seattle sessions, which I don't know that well, but I think are pretty boisterous and out. You know, Coltrane, A Love Supreme era, this record, he's on the edge of going totally free. Well, that's a subjective term, totally free, because not long after this recording, Elvin left, then McCoy left. Or maybe it's the other way around. McCoy left, then Elvin left, replaced by Alice Coltrane and Rashid Ali. But this is just this is a cathartic recording. Put on your safety belt and get ready to ride the waves of this incredible performance. I've read a couple pieces. There's a good New Yorker piece on this record. There's a good piece on by Phil Freeman. I forgot where it is. That's a pretty good piece. But the liner notes by Stanley Ashley Kahn, who is the no doubt the expert in Trane. He wrote The House That Trane Built and another book about Coltrane. It's a great liner notes. It really, really gets into the weeds of this record. You know, almost chronicling every day. Then he takes it, you know, with a stopwatch and tells you what's happening as the recording progresses. There's also really little funny asides. This was I'm not sure if this was a busy strip where the Penthouse was, but I think we're going to see a lot of recordings coming out of the Penthouse because the owner, I think his name was Kuzo, I'm not sure, had a Ampex tape machine set up and recorded with 2 quality mics. That's where the Johnny Griffin, Eddie Lockjaw Davis Record Store Day album came from. I think it's called Pow, and there have been a couple other recordings from this, and they're fantastic recordings. And there's been, as people who grew up with CDs, they hear a record like this and they go, oh my God, I can't hear the tenor, I can't hear the horns. You know, back in the day, I can remember, for instance, when Miles and Coltrane came out on the Dragon label. That was in the early 90s. You didn't really care that it didn't sound great. It actually didn't sound as good as this for pure fidelity and clarity, but it was so great to hear those 2 guys. It was a lost recording that was now available on Dragon, Miles and Trane in Europe. And this, what I thought this is interesting is, I haven't heard the Antibes performance that I think was recorded before this, I believe, in October. I might have the dates wrong, but I believe that's from the audience. This record puts you on the stage. That's the amazing thing. This is like you're on stage sitting next to Elvin. And if I was a musician for a long time, when you sit on a small bandstand, or more so on a big bandstand, you can't always hear everybody. That's why they have monitors on the stage, and you get the monitor mix you want from the sound man. I don't know if that was the case in the mid-60s, but it certainly was the case in the early 80s, late 70s when I was on the road with bands. You always had your own monitor, but this is an acoustic group, so I have a feeling there were no monitors. And yes, Elvin's drums are really loud, but I love it. I mean, you can really hear him. And McCoy is right under that in the volume level, then the bass, then on the left channel you hear Coltrane and Carlos Ward and Pharoah Sanders. And the great thing about the liner notes is they tell you exactly when each guy starts and finishes. And you can sort of hear that. I mean, it's amazing to hear Coltrane play his solos, like in Resolution, which is the most galvanic, hard, swinging, explosive song on this record. It's got that amazing melody, which I first heard off the Bass Desires record of the late 80s with Frizzell and Schofield. They did an amazing version of it. That's the first time I ever heard it. But what this record does, it puts you on the stage. And people say you can't hear the horns. Well, but the amazing thing is you're listening to the rhythm section, and the rhythm sections, particularly this rhythm section, is acutely honed in on the front line. Everything they're playing is in response to the horns, and if anything, because the horns are quieter, it makes you listen harder. You're listening like a musician. You're in the seat with McCoy and Elvin and Jimmy Garrison, and because you're forced to pay closer attention, to my way of thinking, you're really riding the waves of this incredible 75-minute performance. I mean, I think this is an essential performance. It doesn't have Coltrane reciting a love supreme, but the form is entirely there for me. With this expanded group, I mean, I think this is probably what Coltrane had in mind the whole time, because he was already thinking in more expansive terms on all his material. As far out as this record gets, it's never totally free, because Elvin is always swinging. McCoy is always comping. So the closest it gets to me really being free, to my way of thinking, is during the Pharoah Sanders solos in Resolution, I believe, where he is just shrieking and skronking. He sounds like a wounded animal in pain. It's hard to follow each guy without the liner notes, but generally Sanders is more shrieking. He's more what I think of as a classic free jazz player, actually the kind that most people don't want to hear. To me, Pharoah Sanders lacks the lyricism and the positivity of Albert Ayler. Coltrane is much more serious. Even on this record, even when Coltrane is at his most furious, what he's playing is totally logical. You can follow it like a line. It's melodically coherent. It makes sense. And the things he's playing, it's kind of interesting. There's a part on Sonny Rollins' 1542 on the song Decision, where to my ears, it almost he sounds like a computer. He sounds like something scanning something. And there are parts on this record where Coltrane is soloing either in Resolution or Acknowledgement, where it's the same thing. He's chopping up all these phrases and then throwing them at you. And there's a lot of circular phrases. I don't know if he's circular breathing, but he does these repeating phrases. It's very trance-like and meditative and like a mantra. And I believe Ashley Kahn says in the opening bit, they were saying Om backstage, and they were chanting to some degree, I believe, and there's little percussion in places. Trane's playing percussion. It's just an amazing performance with so many levels to dig into. And a little bit about the sound. This is not taken from the tape. I emailed Zev Feldman, who gave me Ken Drucker's email. Ken Drucker produced this. Ken Drucker also produced the No Directions, the Coltrane record of a few years ago that they found. I don't remember exactly what's on that, but he said this was done from tapes. Now in the liner notes, Kevin Reeves, the transfer engineer, who's also done a lot of the Verve Vital vinyl series, he doesn't say one way or the other, but he does speak to the word transfers. So that says to me digital transfers. So for whatever reason, they didn't cut a lacquer from the original tape, even though he says the tapes were in really good condition. He says they were stacked correctly, there was no dropout, they'd been stored correctly, because whoever made these tapes, I forgot his name in here already, knew what he was doing. He was a professional recordist, which you can hear. It's an Ampex machine with two left and right, a left and a right microphone. And why they didn't do it from tape, I don't know. But on a recording like this, does it really matter? It's not a studio recording, but the fidelity is beautiful, particularly obviously with Elvin's drums. And like I said, you're forced to really pay attention. So in that way, it's a deeper immersion in this really amazing four-sided 75-minute journey. It was July '65 for Antibes, so in the summer. So in the fall, they recorded this. This is after the Antibes performance. This recording is in October 1965. The first day of October, he recorded Om in a Seattle studio. Kula Say Mama and Selflessness was recorded on the same tour. Meditation was recorded the next month in Jersey. So Coltrane knew this was a pivotal period for him. Maybe he knew he was transitioning into something else. And Ashley Kahn speaks in the liner notes to it in Seattle at the Penthouse. Coltrane walked out and put the headsets on. to get an idea of what it was going to sound like. So that says he was thinking about it. And this is a pivotal section. After this, you have Ascension and Sonship. With Sonship, a lot of that's inside too. It's all in the really later stuff, I think, like Interstellar Space and Ascension, that are totally out and free. And it's interesting, as I said, when Trane solos on this performance, to me, he's not free. Everything he's playing is very logical. He's doing all these leaps. He's doing repeated melodies. It's playing very rhythmically. But on the later recordings, he's more like Pharaoh, to my way of thinking. He's just shrieking. It's funny, Albert Ayler, to my way of thinking, like I said earlier, was always very lyrical and open and organic and earthy. And there's a folk element in his playing. I don't hear any of the folk element in Coltrane's playing. It's almost kind of a rage. And I think post-Coltrane, the freer players, well, except maybe for Brosman, who was also incredibly kind of militaristic, they took a lighter approach, even though it's free, especially the whole European school. Let me read my notes here and just kind of go through the way I sort of heard this. It opens with acknowledgement. It's a brief intro. Then you have the two basses, Raphael Garrett, which I wonder if he's related to Kenny Garrett, and Jimmy Garrison kind of playing back and forth. And Trane enters and just starts blowing. I wrote down wild spontaneity, the sound of shredding, trance. Now, the guy in the New Yorker said it was the sound shredding of ecstasy and trance-like serenity. I don't hear a whole lot of serenity, but you hear Coltrane moving, trying to get to something, followed by Sanders. And then near the end of the first side, side A, you hear the percussion coming in and a lot of bass soloing. Second side, Resolution kicks in. Carlos Ward takes the first solo, and Trane comes in screaming. Then Pursuance, Coltrane states the theme, then a long Pharoah Sanders solo, and a 9-minute McCoy Tyner solo. And then the fourth side, Psalm, is very slow and fervent. And apparently he's reciting the poem that was on A Love Supreme. He is reciting the poem syllabically. It matches the poem on A Love Supreme if you follow his solo here in Psalm. There are parts on here, the soloing, if you really listen to the soloing from all the players. I mean, to me, Coltrane is the most listenable and logical and has the best tone. Taken all together, there are times where the solos remind me of the Jajuka horns that Brian Jones recorded. There's that definitely sort of, and that was a religious thing. You know, a lot of this has a feeling of a religious experience. If you follow the studio recording from side A to side B, and the whole change from the opening chant to the burning pursuance and resolution to the calmer acknowledgement in the beginning, psalm at the end. This live album is exactly the same thing. It's just expanded, and the emotions are more extreme. The peace-like sections, like Psalm, are more prayerful and fervent. Everyone's playing more in a way, but they're just expanding the theme. You figure they were touring from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. So by the time they got to Seattle, they're ready for bear, man. And the band is on fire. Even with musicians of this caliber, they probably have some nights are better than other nights. And when you're on a long tour like that, they probably got very tired. And there are times when you're really tired as a musician where you really let go. And that's when you can play your greatest stuff, when you're not controlling and thinking about it, when you're really just a channel. And that's what this record sounds like. Like everybody is just at that same point and they connected, and you can really hear it. And the audience is very, very appreciative. The audience is into it. Long applause, some hoots. It's really something. I love the music. It frees your brain as well as how it frees the musicians to really take it out. And Elvin's incredible on this record. This is one of the clearest recordings of Elvin I've ever heard. You're sitting next to him, and he plays some really usual stuff. His solo, I forgot where exactly it's at here. He starts out with unusual snare drum phrases. It's not like his usual thing before he goes into including the full set in his phrases, then full set triplet rolls. And then he goes to the hi-hat, which is more like a Roy Haynes thing, and he does some cymbal rolls. It's before it brings the musicians in. So it's an unusual Elvin solo. McCoy is just amazing throughout. If anything, he's holding it all down. And it's just a brilliant recording, and I really think this recording is a masterpiece. I think this is the companion version that if you like A Love Supreme and you know it well, you've got to hear this, because this expands on A Love Supreme but doesn't take away from it. It's in the same mood, the same air, the same world, that same spiritual place it came out of. It was also interesting in the liner notes, apparently not only was it called free jazz and spiritual music, and the new thing was also called energy music, which I think is the perfect way to describe his music, because it is pure energy. It's intellectual and cerebral, but it's also very guttural and from that special place. Some people think your spirit is right here below your heart. You got to give this record a listen. It's a fantastic recording. We sold out the Jazz Record Center. Thanks again for watching my video. And next up, we're going to take a different direction. Next up, we'll be reviewing these two fun releases, cheery releases. A Charlie Brown Peanuts Christmas. Where else are you going to get that? Thank you.